Miss Marple and the Dollmaker's secret vow. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of St. Mary Mead as Miss Jane Marple made her way down the high street, her wicker basket swinging gently at her side. It was the sort of crisp autumn morning that brought out the best in the village, golden leaves scattered like coins along the pavements, and the scent of wood smoke drifting from cottage chimneys. "Good morning, Miss Marple," called Mrs. Bantry from across the street, waving enthusiastically. "You'll never guess what's happened." Miss Marple paused, adjusting her lace shawl. In her experience, when someone in St. Mary Mead said you'd never guess, it usually meant the entire village already knew. "Good morning, Dolly. What news?" "Old Cornelius Whitlock has died." "Oh dear," Miss Marple murmured, though she wasn't entirely surprised. The reclusive Dollmaker had been in poor health for months. When did it happen? "Yesterday afternoon. But here's the extraordinary part. He's left his entire estate to young Felicity Harmon. Can you imagine? That enormous house, the workshop, everything." Miss Marple's pale blue eyes sharpened with interest. Felicity Harmon was the village librarian, a quiet girl of perhaps 25, who had arrived in St. Mary Mead only 3 years ago. As far as anyone knew, she had no connection to Cornelius Whitlock whatsoever. "How very unusual," Miss Marple observed mildly. "I wasn't aware they were acquainted." "That's just it. Nobody was. The solicitor, Mr. Pennyweather, is beside himself. Apparently Mr. Whitlock changed his will just 2 weeks ago. Cut out his nephew entirely." The nephew. Miss Marple remembered him vaguely, a sullen young man named Marcus who visited occasionally from London, always leaving with a sour expression and empty pockets. Cornelius had never been known for his generosity, particularly where family was concerned. "I really must be getting on," Mrs. Bantry said. "Already moving away, but do come to tea tomorrow. Everyone will be there, and I'm sure we'll learn more." Miss Marple continued her walk, but her mind was no longer on her shopping list. The Whitlock house stood at the edge of the village, a Victorian monstrosity of turrets and gables that had fascinated and frightened local children for generations. Cornelius himself had been equally Gothic, a tall, gaunt figure who rarely ventured out, except to collect his supplies, spending his days crafting extraordinarily lifelike dolls that fetched high prices from collectors around the world. She turned down Vicarage Lane, where the morning glory still clung to the cottage walls, and nearly collided with a young woman hurrying in the opposite direction. "Oh, Miss Marple, I'm so sorry." It was Felicity Harmon herself, her usually neat auburn hair disheveled, her face pale, except for 2 spots of high color on her cheeks. "Not at all, my dear. I hear congratulations are in order, though perhaps condolences would be more appropriate under the circumstances." Felicity's hands twisted together. I don't understand it. I barely knew Mr. Whitlock. We spoke perhaps 3 times in as many years. Why would he?" She trailed off, looking genuinely distressed. "These things are often mysterious," Miss Marple said gently. "Perhaps he admired you from afar. You do such good work at the library." "The police want to speak with me," Felicity burst out. "They say it's routine, but I can tell what they're thinking. That I must have influenced him somehow. But I swear to you, Miss Marple, I never asked for anything." "Of course not, dear. Inspector Slack can be rather heavy-handed at times. I'm sure it will all be sorted out." But as Felicity hurried away, Miss Marple noticed something that made her pause. The young woman's coat pocket bulged oddly, and protruding from it was what appeared to be a small porcelain hand, the kind used in Cornelius Whitlock's dolls. Later that afternoon, Miss Marple found herself in the post office, where village gossip flowed as freely as the tea at the vicarage. "Mark my words," Mrs. Pike was saying to anyone who would listen. "There's something not right about it all. Cornelius Whitlock was many things, but impulsive wasn't one of them. To change his will so suddenly, perhaps he had a premonition," suggested Miss Weatherby, the doctor's wife. "They say the elderly sometimes know when their time is near." "Elderly? He was barely 70, Mrs. Pike sniffed, "and healthy as a horse, until last month, when he took that sudden turn." Miss Marple selected her stamps quietly, but her ears were attuned to every word. A sudden turn. That was interesting. Dr. Haydock had mentioned nothing about Cornelius being ill when she'd last spoken to him. And what about the nephew? Another voice chimed in. Marcus was counting on that inheritance. Everyone knows he owed money all over London. He's driving down today, I heard. Furious, apparently. Mr. Pennyweather told my husband that Marcus threatened to contest the will. Miss Marple made her purchases and stepped back out into the afternoon sun. The village seemed particularly peaceful, but she had lived long enough to know that beneath the tranquil surface of any small community, currents ran deep and sometimes dark. She decided to take the long way home, which happened to lead past the Whitlock house. The Gothic mansion loomed against the sky, its windows dark except for one on the ground floor where she could see movement. The workshop, she realized, where Cornelius had created his uncanny dolls. As she watched, a figure appeared at the window, tall, dark-haired, moving with quick, agitated gestures. The nephew, presumably, already taking inventory of what he believed should be his. Nasty piece of work, that one. Miss Marple turned to find Jim Barnes, the village handyman, pushing a wheelbarrow full of gardening tools. You know Mr. Marcus Whitlock, Jim. Did some work up at the house last summer. He was visiting then. Heard him arguing with the old man something terrible. All about money, of course. Marcus wanted to turn the place into flats. Can you imagine? Old Cornelius threw him out, said he'd rather leave it all to charity than see his life's work destroyed. And yet he left it to Miss Harmon instead. Jim scratched his head. Aye, that's the puzzle, isn't it? Though, he paused, as if deciding whether to continue. Yes. Well, I probably shouldn't say, but I did see her going up there about 2 weeks ago. Late evening it was. Thought it was odd at the time, her being such a quiet sort. 2 weeks ago, just when the will was changed. Miss Marple filed this information away carefully. I'm sure there was a perfectly innocent explanation, she said mildly. Oh, I'm not suggesting otherwise, Jim said quickly. Miss Harmon's a lovely girl. Always polite, always helpful. It's just, well, you know how people talk. Indeed she did, and in Miss Marple's experience, while village gossip was often exaggerated, it rarely sprang from nothing at all. As she finally made her way home to her own cozy cottage, Miss Marple reflected on the morning's discoveries: an unexpected inheritance, a disinherited nephew, a secret visit, and a porcelain hand hidden in a coat pocket. Any one of these things might mean nothing. Together they suggested a pattern. She paused at her garden gate, admiring the late roses that still bloomed despite the season. Tomorrow, at Mrs. Bantry's tea party, she would learn more. The village would gather, tongues would wag, and perhaps someone would let slip the crucial detail that would illuminate the whole affair. But for now, she had a feeling, just a feeling, but her feelings were rarely wrong, that Cornelius Whitlock's death was not quite as natural as it appeared. And if she was right, then the real question wasn't why he had left his fortune to Felicity Harmon. The real question was whether he had lived long enough to regret it. As she opened her front door, a chill wind swept through the garden, scattering the fallen leaves and carrying with it the faint scent of something chemical, something sharp and medicinal. It reminded her of something, though she couldn't quite place what. No matter. It would come to her, as these things always did. In the meantime, she would make herself a nice cup of tea, and perhaps work on her knitting. After all, the best observations were often made when one appeared to be doing nothing at all. The next afternoon found Miss Marple seated comfortably in Mrs. Bantry's conservatory, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically as the cream of St. Mary Mead Society assembled around her. The autumn sun filtered through the glass panels, casting geometric shadows across the Persian rug. More tea, Miss Marple. Mrs. Bantry hovered with the Georgian silver teapot, her eyes bright with anticipation of the gossip to come. Thank you, dear. Just half a cup. The French doors burst open, admitting Mrs. Pike in a flutter of scarves and indignation. You'll never believe what I've just heard. Marcus Whitlock has been questioning everyone in the village about his uncle's state of mind. He's building a case for mental incompetence. How distressing, murmured Miss Hartnell. The vicar's sister, though she leaned forward eagerly, What sort of questions? Oh, the usual nonsense. Had Cornelius been acting strangely? Did he seem confused? Had anyone noticed him talking to his dolls? Mrs. Pike settled herself into a chair with a theatrical sigh, as if talking to one's creations were a sign of madness. I talk to my roses all the time. Your roses don't have human hair and glass eyes, observed Colonel Bantry dryly from his corner, where he had retreated with his pipe and newspaper. Actually, said a quiet voice from the doorway, Mr. Whitlock's dolls did have human hair. He was very particular about it. Everyone turned to see Felicity Harmon standing uncertainly at the threshold, a plate of Mrs. Bantry's famous seed cake in her hand. "My dear girl!" Mrs. Bantry exclaimed. "Do come in. We were gossiping about my inheritance," Felicity said with a wan smile. "It's all right, Mrs. Bantry. The whole village is talking about it. I thought I might as well hear what's being said." Miss Marple studied the young woman as she found a seat. Despite her brave words, Felicity looked drawn, with dark circles under her eyes. She wore a simple grey dress that emphasized her pallor, and her hands trembled slightly as she set down the plate. "We're simply concerned," Miss Hartnell said, which was her way of justifying any amount of prying. "It must be such a shock for you." "The shock," Felicity said carefully, "was discovering that Mr. Whitlock even knew my name. We'd exchanged perhaps a dozen words in 3 years. But Jim Barnes saw you visiting the house," Mrs. Pike said triumphantly, then immediately looked ashamed of her outburst. Felicity's cheeks flushed. "Yes, I did visit him. Once. He sent me a note asking me to come. Said he had some books he wanted to donate to the library." "And did he?" Miss Marple asked gently, her needles never pausing. "Yes. First editions of Victorian Gothic novels. Quite valuable, actually," he said. She paused, biting her lip. He said, "They were wasted on a man who created his own Gothic tales." "How poetic," Mrs. Bantry said. "Cornelius was always odd, but I never knew he had a literary turn of mind." "He was more cultured than people realized," said a new voice. Dr. Haydock had arrived, his medical bag in hand. "I've been attending him these past months. Brilliant man, actually. We had some fascinating conversations about the nature of mortality." "Morbid, you mean," Mrs. Pike corrected. "Perhaps. But when a man knows he's dying, such topics become rather relevant." A hush fell over the room. Miss Marple looked up from her knitting. He knew he was ill. Dr. Haydock nodded gravely. "Heart condition. I'd given him 6 months at the outside. He took it remarkably well, all things considered. Said he had preparations to make." "Then he must have known Marcus would inherit," Colonel Bantry observed, "unless he made other arrangements." "Which he did," Felicity said quietly. "Though I still don't understand why." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of raised voices from the garden. Through the conservatory windows, they could see Marcus Whitlock arguing with someone, a small, sharp-featured woman in an expensive coat. "Good heavens," Mrs. Bantry exclaimed. "That's Lydia Whitlock, Cornelius's sister. I haven't seen her in 20 years. They watched as Marcus gestured angrily, while Lydia stood her ground, her chin raised defiantly. Finally, Marcus stormed off, leaving Lydia standing alone among the rose bushes. "Should we?" Mrs. Bantry began, but Lydia was already making her way toward the conservatory. "I apologize for the dramatics," she said, as she entered, her voice crisp and controlled. "My nephew has inherited his father's temper. I'm afraid, Mrs. Bantry, how kind of you to remember me." "Lydia, what a surprise. Do sit down. You know everyone, of course?" "By reputation, if not personally." Lydia's sharp eyes swept the room, lingering on Felicity. "Ah, the heiress. How interesting to finally meet you." Felicity shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Whitlock, I want you to know—"
"That you had nothing to do with my brother's decision?"
Lydia interrupted. "Oh, I'm quite sure of that, my dear. Cornelius never did anything he didn't want to do. The question is why he wanted to do this." "You weren't close to your brother?" Miss Marple inquired. Lydia laughed, a brittle sound. "Close? We hadn't spoken in 2 decades. Not since—" She stopped abruptly. "Not since the incident," Mrs. Pike supplied helpfully. I remember now. There was some sort of family scandal, wasn't there? If you could call the death of a child a scandal, Lydia said coldly. Another silence fell, heavier than before. Miss Marple noticed that Felicity had gone very pale. A child? Dr. Haydock asked. I didn't know Cornelius had children. He didn't. The child was mine. Lydia's voice was steady, but her hands clenched in her lap. My daughter. She died in that house 30 years ago. An accident, they said. But Cornelius blamed himself. He'd been watching her while I was in town. She got into his workshop. How dreadful, Miss Hartnell breathed. She was playing with one of his dolls, the one with the blue velvet dress and golden hair, just like hers. Lydia's eyes had taken on a distant look. He found her on the floor. The doll's porcelain head had shattered, and somehow a shard had cut her throat. She bled to death before the doctor could arrive. Miss Marple's needles had stilled. She was remembering the porcelain hand in Felicity's pocket, and the way the girl was now gripping the arms of her chair. I never blamed him, Lydia continued. It was an accident, but he blamed himself. Said he should have locked the workshop. Should have been more careful. He never made another child doll after that. Only adults. As if he could somehow prevent. She shook her head, returning to the present. But that's ancient history. I came here because Marcus told me about the will. He thinks I'll support him in contesting it. He's wrong.
You won't?
Mrs. Bantry asked, surprised. Why should I? Cornelius owed me nothing. If he chose to leave his fortune to a stranger, that was his right. I'm only curious about the why. She looked directly at Felicity. You truly have no idea. None, Felicity whispered. I swear. Then perhaps, Lydia said thoughtfully. You reminded him of someone. Cornelius was always one for symbols and signs. Did he ever say anything to suggest? But Felicity was already shaking her head. We barely spoke. Just that once, about the books, and even then, she was interrupted by a crash from outside. Through the windows, they could see Marcus in the garden again, this time apparently having knocked over one of Mrs. Bantry's prized garden urns. I'd better see to that, Colonel Bantry said, rising with a sigh, before he destroys the entire garden. As he left, Miss Marple noticed something the others had missed. In the brief moment when the door opened, a piece of paper had blown in on the breeze. It settled near her feet, a page torn from a notebook covered in spidery handwriting. She bent to retrieve it, recognizing Cornelius Whitlock's distinctive script. Only a few words were legible. The debt must be paid. She has her mother's eyes. The doll remembers what I cannot forget. Is everything all right, Miss Marple? Dr. Haydock asked, noticing her stillness. Oh yes, she said, slipping the paper into her knitting bag. Just a slight twinge. The autumn weather, you know. But her mind was racing. She has her mother's eyes. She looked at Felicity, who was now engaged in quiet conversation with Lydia. The girl's eyes were unusual, a deep violet blue fringed with dark lashes, beautiful, but surely not so uncommon as to inspire such a bequest. Unless, of course, Cornelius had seen those eyes before, in another face, at another time. I should go, Felicity said suddenly, rising. I'm meeting with Mr. Pennyweather this afternoon about the estate papers. Of course, dear, Mrs. Bantry said. But do be careful, with all this unpleasantness. I'll be fine, Felicity assured her. But Miss Marple noticed she clutched her handbag tightly as she left, and her glance toward the garden where Marcus still prowled was fearful. After she'd gone, conversation turned to other matters, but Miss Marple remained thoughtful. The torn page in her bag seemed to pulse with significance, a debt to be paid, a doll that remembered, and a pair of violet eyes that had perhaps been seen before in St. Mary Mead. You're very quiet, Jane, Mrs. Bantry observed. What do you make of it all? I think, Miss Marple said slowly, that the past has a way of reaching into the present, like ripples in a pond, spreading outward until they touch the most unexpected shores. How poetic, Mrs. Pike said dismissively. But it doesn't explain why Cornelius left everything to that girl. No, Miss Marple agreed. But then, I don't think we've heard the full story yet. In my experience, Family secrets are like Mr. Whitlock's dolls. They may appear perfect on the surface, but look closer and you'll find the cracks where they've been broken and mended. And sometimes, she paused, thinking of the shattered doll that had killed a child, and the porcelain hand hidden in Felicity's pocket. Sometimes the mending doesn't quite hold. The following morning brought unseasonable fog to St. Mary Mead, shrouding the village in a grey blanket that muffled sound and blurred the edges of reality. Miss Marple, ever an early riser, was in her garden tending to her chrysanthemums when she heard the commotion.
Murder!
The word rang out through the fog, followed by the sound of running feet. There's been a murder. Miss Marple set down her gardening shears and made her way to the front gate. Young Tommy Hayes, the baker's boy, was racing down the lane, his face white with shock. "Tommy," she called out. "Whatever is the matter?" He skidded to a halt, panting. "It's Mr. Marcus Whitlock. He's dead, in the old workshop, blood everywhere." Miss Marple's hand tightened on the gate. "Have the police been called?" "Mr. Barnes is telephoning them now. He found the body when he went to do the gardening. Says, it's horrible, miss. Just horrible." Within the hour, the fog had lifted enough to reveal the full extent of the village's shock. Police cars lined the drive to the Whitlock house, and Inspector Slack's familiar blustering voice could be heard even from the road. Miss Marple, who had taken the precaution of bringing a basket of preserves for poor Felicity in her time of trouble, managed to slip past the constable at the gate. "Now see here," Inspector Slack was saying to a shaken Jim Barnes. "You're certain the workshop was locked when you arrived?"
Yes, sir.
"Had to use my spare key. Mr. Cornelius gave it to me years ago for the maintenance work." "And the body?" Jim shuddered, sitting in the chair by the workbench. "At first I thought he was sleeping, but then I saw the blood and the doll."
Doll?
Inspector Slack's eyebrows shot up. "One of Mr. Cornelius's special ones. The old ones he never sold. It was positioned on his lap, like, with its hands on his chest where the wound was." Miss Marple quietly approached Dr. Haydock, who was standing to one side, looking grim. "Stabbed," he said before she could ask. "Single wound to the heart. Very precise. Death would have been almost instantaneous. The weapon? Missing, but from the wound I'd say something thin and sharp, like a stiletto or perhaps a doll-making tool," Miss Marple suggested. Dr. Haydock looked at her sharply. "Yes, actually, Cornelius had a set of antique tools for the delicate work, silver-handled, very sharp." "Miss Marple," Inspector Slack had noticed her. "This is a crime scene, not a parish bazaar. You can't be here." "Of course, Inspector. I just brought these preserves for Miss Harmon. Such a shock for the poor girl. First inheriting under such mysterious circumstances, and now this." "Mysterious circumstances?" Slack's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "Oh, nothing really. Just village talk about why Mr. Cornelius changed his will so suddenly. And then there was that business with his sister's child. All those years ago." She let the words hang in the air, noting how Slack's expression changed from irritation to interest. "What child? What are you talking about?" Miss Marple explained briefly about Lydia's daughter and the tragic accident in the workshop. Slack's frown deepened. "In this same workshop? And now the nephew's been killed here too? It does seem an unfortunate coincidence." Miss Marple agreed mildly. "I suppose you'll want to speak with Miss Harmon. She inherits everything now, doesn't she?" "If she didn't already," Slack muttered. "Barnes, where's this Harmon woman?" "At the library, sir," Jim supplied. "She opens up early on Thursdays. Thompson, get down there and bring her in for questioning, and find that sister, Lydia Whitlock. She was seen arguing with the victim yesterday." Miss Marple made her way slowly back toward the gate, but not before catching a glimpse through the workshop window. The scene was indeed macabre. Marcus slumped in the chair, and on his lap a beautiful antique doll in a blue velvet dress with golden hair. The same description Lydia had given of the doll her daughter had been playing with when she died. "Gives you the shivers, doesn't it?" Miss Marple turned to find P.C. Thompson beside her. "That doll's been in the workshop for 30 years, Jim Barnes says. Mr. Cornelius could never bear to repair it, After what happened, left it on the shelf like a memorial, and now it's been used in another death, Miss Marple murmured. How very theatrical. Almost like someone sending a message, Thompson agreed, then looked embarrassed. Sorry, miss, shouldn't be discussing the case. But Miss Marple was already processing this information. A message, indeed, but from whom? And to whom? She made her way to the library, arriving just as Inspector Slack was leaving with Felicity. The girl looked terrified, her violet eyes wide with shock. I don't understand, she was saying. Marcus was alive when I left the Bantries yesterday. I went straight home. My landlady can confirm it. We'll check that, Slack said grimly. In the meantime, you'll need to come to the station. As they passed, Felicity caught sight of Miss Marple. Please, she said desperately. Tell them I couldn't have done this. I've never hurt anyone in my life. Now, miss, Slack intervened. No need for dramatics. They drove away, leaving Miss Marple standing thoughtfully on the library steps. After a moment, she entered the building. Miss Knight, the assistant librarian, was at the desk, looking flustered. Oh, Miss Marple, isn't it dreadful? Poor Felicity hauled off like a common criminal. I'm sure it's just routine questioning, Miss Marple soothed. Tell me, has Felicity seemed different lately, since the inheritance? Miss Knight considered. Well, she has been distracted, and yesterday morning, before all the fuss at Mrs. Bantry's, she was in the archives for hours. The archives? Where we keep the old newspapers and parish records. Said she was researching local history for a display. But, well, she seemed particularly interested in the newspapers from 30 years ago, right around the time that poor child died. Miss Marple's interest sharpened. Did she take any copies? That's the odd thing. She made several, but then threw them away. I found them in the wastebasket after she left, crumpled up like she was angry about something. Do you still have them? Miss Knight looked guilty. I know I shouldn't have, but I was curious. I smoothed them out and kept them. They're in my desk. The photocopies, when produced, were revealing. They were all from the same week 30 years ago, reporting on the death of Emma Sinclair, aged 6, daughter of Mrs. Lydia Sinclair, later Whitlock after her marriage. The child had been visiting her uncle Cornelius Whitlock when the accident occurred. But it was the photograph that made Miss Marple catch her breath. Little Emma Sinclair gazed out from the page with a sweet, solemn face and unmistakable violet eyes. She has her mother's eyes, Miss Marple murmured, remembering the torn note, but Lydia's eyes were brown. She'd noticed particularly yesterday. I'm sorry? Miss Knight asked. Nothing, dear. May I borrow these? Outside, Miss Marple walked slowly, her mind working through the possibilities. Felicity had been researching Emma Sinclair. Emma had violet eyes, unusual enough to be remarked upon. Felicity also had violet eyes, and Cornelius had written about someone having her mother's eyes, but Emma's mother had brown eyes. Unless, Miss Marple changed direction, heading for the rectory. The vicar kept excellent records, and she needed to check something. The Reverend Clement was out, but his wife gladly gave Miss Marple access to the parish registers. It didn't take long to find what she was looking for. Emma Sinclair, baptized 6 years before her death. Parents listed as Lydia Sinclair and George Sinclair, but George Sinclair had died 2 years before Emma was born. How curious, Miss Marple said aloud. What's that, Miss Marple? Mrs. Clement peered over her shoulder. Oh, poor little Emma. I remember that tragedy. Such a beautiful child. Looked nothing like her mother, everyone said. Those extraordinary eyes. Did anyone ever suggest who her actual father might have been? Mrs. Clement looked shocked. Miss Marple, what a question. A necessary one, I'm afraid. You see, I believe it might have bearing on current events. Well, Mrs. Clement lowered her voice. There was talk. Lydia was very beautiful then, and after her husband died, she had several admirers, but she was always very proper. The only scandal was, yes? Well, she spent a great deal of time at her brother's house, helping with his work, she said. Some people thought it odd, a young widow spending so much time alone with her brother. But surely you don't think, I try not to think anything without evidence, Miss Marple said carefully. But I do observe. And sometimes the most shocking truths are hidden in plain sight. She thanked Mrs. Clement and left, her mind whirling with possibilities. If Emma Sinclair had been Cornelius's daughter rather than his niece, it would explain so much, the guilt that had haunted him. The estrangement from his sister, the significance of those violet eyes, but it didn't explain why he had left his fortune to Felicity Harmon. Unless, Miss Marple quickened her pace. She needed to speak with Lydia Whitlock before Inspector Slack's heavy-handed questioning muddied the waters. But first, she had one more stop to make. The cottage where Felicity lodged was a modest affair on the outskirts of the village. Her landlady, Mrs. Price, was in the garden, looking distressed. "Oh, Miss Marple, have you heard? They've arrested Felicity. That Inspector Slack was here, asking all sorts of questions. I told him she came home at 6 yesterday, and never left, but he seemed to think I was lying." "I'm sure he's just being thorough," Miss Marple consoled. "Tell me, how long has Felicity been lodging with you?" 3 years come Michaelmas. Such a quiet girl. Keeps to herself mostly. Does she ever have visitors? Family, perhaps?" "Never. Says she has no family. Grew up in an orphanage in London. Poor thing. That's why I was so surprised about the inheritance. Didn't think she knew a soul here, except through the library. An orphan, with unusual violet eyes, who had somehow caught the attention of a guilt-ridden old man." "Mrs. Price," Miss Marple said carefully, "did Felicity ever mention anything about trying to trace her family? Many orphans do, you know." The landlady brightened. "Funny you should ask. Just last month she received a letter that got her all excited. Said she'd finally found a lead about her mother. Been waiting years for the orphanage records to be released, or some such thing." "Did she say what she'd learned?" "Only that her mother had died when she was born, and there might be family in Hampshire. She was planning to visit on her next holiday." Hampshire, where St. Mary Mead was located. The pieces were falling into place now, forming a picture that was both tragic and inevitable. Miss Marple thanked Mrs. Price and headed for her final destination, the Whitlock house, where answers waited among the dolls and shadows of the past. But as she approached the Gothic mansion, now festooned with police tape, she saw something that made her stop in her tracks. Lydia Whitlock was emerging from a side entrance, her face streaked with tears. In her hands, she clutched something wrapped in faded blue velvet. Their eyes met across the distance, and in that moment, Miss Marple saw not guilt, but a grief so profound it had lasted 30 years. "You know," Lydia said simply. "Somehow you know." "I'm beginning to understand," Miss Marple replied gently. "But I think there's more to know, isn't there? About Emma, about Felicity, and about why Marcus had to die." Lydia's hands tightened on the bundle. He was going to destroy everything, all the evidence, all the secrets. He didn't care about the truth, only the money. And someone stopped him. "Yes," Lydia whispered. "Someone stopped him. But perhaps it's time for the truth to come out at last." She held out the bundle to Miss Marple. Through the faded velvet, the outline of a doll could be seen. "This is what Marcus was really looking for," Lydia said. "Not money, not property. But this, Cornelius hid it 30 years ago, and I've only just found it. Inside is the proof of everything. But I warn you, Miss Marple, sometimes the truth is more terrible than any lie." Miss Marple accepted the bundle with steady hands. Whatever secrets it contained, whatever truths would emerge, one thing was certain before this day was over: a murderer would be revealed. And perhaps at last, a 30-year-old ghost would be laid to rest. Miss Marple sat in her parlour, the blue velvet bundle on the table before her. She had declined Lydia's offer to stay while she examined it, sensing the woman needed time to compose herself before the inevitable police questions. With careful fingers, she unwrapped the velvet. Inside was not the broken doll from Emma's accident, but a different one entirely. A beautiful creation with auburn hair and a green silk dress. But it was the doll's face that made Miss Marple's breath catch. Those violet eyes, so carefully painted, were unmistakably familiar. The doll was hollow, she discovered, with a cunningly concealed opening in the back. Inside were papers, yellow with age, but still legible. The first was a birth certificate. Female infant, born the 15th of March 1995, St. Bartholomew's Hospital, London. Mother, Emma Sinclair, deceased. Father, unknown. Child given name, Felicity Emma. Miss Marple set the certificate aside with trembling fingers. Emma Sinclair had not died at 6 years old. She had lived long enough to bear a child, a daughter with her distinctive violet eyes. The next document was a letter in Cornelius Whitlock's spidery hand. Asterisk. My dearest Emma, by the time you read this, I will have arranged everything. The child will be safe, placed with the good sisters at St. Catherine's, Saf. No one must know she is yours or mine. The scandal would destroy us both, but more importantly, it would destroy her chances for a normal life. I have told Lydia you died in the workshop accident. She believes it, as does the village. Dr. Morrison has arranged everything. You will go to Switzerland as planned, to the sanatorium. When you are well again, you can start a new life. I know you hate me for this. Perhaps you are right too. A father should protect his daughter. But we cannot change what has been done. We can only try to minimize the damage. The child will be told nothing. When she is old enough, if she seeks answers, I will ensure she inherits what should have been yours. It is the least I can do. Forgive me, if you can. Your loving father, Cornelius *. Miss Marple leaned back, the full horror of the situation washing over her. Cornelius, and his own daughter, a child born of that union. Emma sent away, supposedly dead, and Lydia left to grieve for 30 years for a daughter who had actually lived. The next letter was different. Modern paper, recent ink. Asterisk. Dear Mr. Whitlock, I am writing to you as a last resort. My name is Felicity Harmon, and I have recently discovered that I am the daughter of Emma Sinclair. The orphanage where I was raised has finally released their records, and your name appears as the person who arranged my placement. I don't want money or scandal. I only want to know about my mother. What was she like? Why did she give me up? Did she ever think of me? I have taken a position at the library in St. Mary Mead. I hope perhaps we might meet, and you could tell me something, anything, about where I come from. Yours hopefully, Felicity Harmon *. So Felicity had come to St. Mary Mead, seeking answers about her mother, not knowing that her grandfather and father were the same man. Cornelius, faced with this ghost from the past, had done what he thought best, left her everything perhaps as penance for his sins. But there was one more document in the doll's cavity, a modern envelope marked to be opened only in the event of my death. CW. Inside was a confession. I, Cornelius Whitlock, being of sound mind, do hereby confess to the murder of my daughter Emma Sinclair, on this day, the 30th of September 2024. She came to me 3 days ago, not dead, as I had made the world believe, but alive, changed beyond recognition by years of illness and bitterness. But alive, she had been watching Felicity, she said, following her. She knew I had been meeting with the girl, knew I planned to leave her my estate. She's mine, Emma said. My daughter. You have no right to her. But what she planned for Felicity was monstrous. She spoke of revenge, of making the girl suffer for the life Emma had lost. She had already begun. Small cruelties, anonymous letters, attempts to isolate her. She showed me photographs she had taken of Felicity sleeping, proof that she could enter the girl's lodgings at will. I begged her to leave Felicity alone. The child was innocent, but Emma laughed, a terrible sound. The sanatorium had not cured her. If anything, the years of isolation had twisted her mind further. I'll tell everyone, she said. About us, about what you did. Felicity will know her father was a monster. Unless she wanted money. Enough to disappear again. But I knew she wouldn't disappear. She would hover at the edges of Felicity's life, a malevolent shadow, destroying any chance of happiness the girl might have. So I killed her. I used the old doll-making knife, the one I should have locked away 30 years ago. She didn't expect it, still saw me as the father who had always given in to her demands. It was quick. I buried her in the workshop floor, beneath the spot where I had told everyone she died as a child. poetic justice, perhaps. Then I changed my will, ensuring Felicity would inherit everything before Emma's body could be discovered. I know Marcus suspects something. He has been prowling around the workshop, asking questions. If he discovers the truth, he will use it to destroy Felicity's inheritance. He must not be allowed to do so. I pray God will forgive me. I do not expect it. A father who fails his daughter as I failed. Emma deserves no forgiveness, but perhaps in death I can finally protect my granddaughter, as I failed to protect my child. Cornelius Whitlock *. Miss Marple set down the confession, her mind racing. Cornelius had killed Emma and hidden her body in the workshop. But then who had killed Marcus? Not Cornelius. He had been dead for days. The doorbell interrupted her thoughts. Inspector Slack stood on her doorstep, looking harassed. Miss Marple, I need to ask you about something. We've been excavating the workshop floor based on an anonymous tip. We found human remains. Female, been there about a week. Dr. Haydock says the body shows signs of stab wounds.
Indeed.
Miss Marple kept her expression neutral. How disturbing. The thing is, we can't identify her. No missing persons reports match. But we found this near the body. He held up an evidence bag containing a silver locket. Through the plastic, Miss Marple could see an old photograph, a young woman with dark hair and violet eyes. I thought perhaps, with your knowledge of village history, you might recognize her. Miss Marple studied the photograph carefully. The woman looked nothing like the golden-haired child Emma had been. Years of illness and hardship had changed her beyond recognition. Only the eyes remained the same. I'm afraid I don't recognize her, Inspector. But perhaps, if you showed it to Lydia Whitlock, she might have better knowledge of her brother's acquaintances. Slack grunted. Already tried. She took one look and fainted dead away. Dr. Haydock's with her now. Between you and me, I think she knows more than she's saying. People often do, Miss Marple agreed. Tell me, Inspector, have you released Miss Harmon? Had to. Her alibi checks out, but she's still our prime suspect. Who else benefits from Marcus Whitlock's death? Perhaps, Miss Marple suggested mildly, you should be asking who wanted to prevent Marcus from inheriting, or who wanted to stop him from discovering something in that workshop. Slack's eyes sharpened. You know something. I know that the past has a way of demanding payment, Miss Marple said carefully, and that sometimes, Inspector, the real crime occurred long before the murder. After Slack left, Miss Marple sat thinking. The pieces were almost all in place now. Cornelius had killed Emma to protect Felicity, but someone else had killed Marcus, someone who knew about the body in the workshop floor, someone who couldn't afford to let Marcus discover it. The anonymous tip to the police was interesting. Why reveal the body now, unless... Miss Marple reached for her telephone. There was one more person she needed to speak with, someone who had been at the edges of this tragedy from the beginning, watching, waiting. Dr. Haydock. It's Jane Marple. I wonder if you could spare me a few minutes. Yes, it's about the Whitlock case. I believe I know who killed Marcus, but I need to confirm something first. About Emma Sinclair's supposed death 30 years ago. The truth, she reflected as she waited for the doctor, was indeed more terrible than any lie. But it was only through facing the truth that the living could finally be free of the dead. And somewhere in St. Mary Mead, a murderer was waiting, believing their secret was safe. They were about to discover how wrong they were. Dr. Haydock arrived within the hour, his usually cheerful face grave. He settled into Miss Marple's comfortable armchair with the air of a man about to unburden himself of a long-carried weight. I suppose you've guessed, he said without preamble, about Emma, that she didn't die 30 years ago? Yes, but I'd like to hear the truth from you, Doctor. He sighed deeply. I wasn't yet practicing here when it happened. It was old Dr. Morrison who handled everything. I only learned the truth when I took over his practice and found his private records. By then, it seemed kinder to let sleeping dogs lie. But the dogs didn't sleep, did they? Miss Marple observed. Tell me what really happened. According to Morrison's notes, Cornelius brought Emma to him that night, not dead but in severe distress. She was pregnant, about 5 months along. The shock of discovering her condition combined with the unusual circumstances, had triggered a mental breakdown. She knew Cornelius was her father. No, that was the horror of it. She didn't know. Lydia had never told her that George Sinclair wasn't her real father. Emma believed Cornelius was simply her beloved uncle, when she realized she was carrying his child. Dr. Haydock shook his head. Morrison sedated her heavily, said she was hysterical, threatening to hurt herself and the baby. So they faked her death. Cornelius was desperate. The scandal would have destroyed them all. Morrison had connections at a private sanatorium in Switzerland. They arranged everything. The story about the workshop accident, the closed coffin funeral. Lydia was told Emma had been disfigured beyond recognition. And Emma herself? Sent to Switzerland that very night. The baby was born there, immediately taken away. Emma spent the next 25 years in various institutions. Morrison kept tabs on her through colleagues. She never fully recovered mentally, but she was considered harmless. Until she escaped, Miss Marple said quietly. Dr. Haydock started. How did you know? She came back, didn't she? Recently. That's the woman buried in the workshop floor. The doctor's face went white. You found Cornelius's confession, among other things. But you knew she had returned. You treated Cornelius for his heart condition. He would have told you. He was terrified, Dr. Haydock admitted. Said Emma had been watching Felicity, planning something terrible. He begged me to help him have her committed again, but without proper documentation, proof of identity, I told him to go to the police. But he couldn't. Not without revealing the whole truth. Exactly. The last time I saw him alive, he said he would handle it himself. I never imagined. The doctor rubbed his face. When he died, I thought it was his heart. Natural causes. It never occurred to me to check for anything else. Miss Marple leaned forward. But you signed the death certificate without an autopsy. His heart condition was severe. There was no reason to suspect. He paused. Are you saying Cornelius was murdered? I'm saying, doctor, that a man who had just killed his daughter and hidden her body might have been under considerable stress. Enough to trigger a fatal heart attack. Or perhaps, she was interrupted by urgent knocking at her door. Jim Barnes stood outside, cap in hand, face flushed with exertion. Miss Marple, you'd better come quick. There's been another incident at the Whitlock house. Miss Lydia's locked herself in the workshop with a can of petrol. Says she's going to burn it all down. They hurried through the village, Dr. Haydock's car covering the distance quickly. A crowd had gathered outside the Whitlock house, held back by police constables. Inspector Slack was shouting through a megaphone. Mrs. Whitlock, this won't solve anything. Come out and we can discuss this reasonably. Through the workshop windows, they could see Lydia moving about, splashing petrol over the workbenches, the dolls, the floor where her daughter's body had been found. 20 minutes she's been in there, Slack told them. Won't talk to anyone? We can't rush her. One spark and the whole place goes up. Let me try, Miss Marple said quietly. You? Don't be ridiculous. But she was already walking toward the workshop door. Lydia? It's Jane Marple. May I come in? There was a long pause. Then, are you alone? Yes, dear. Just me. The door opened a crack. Lydia's face appeared, haggard and wild-eyed. You know the truth. I can see it in your eyes. Come in then. Someone should witness this. The workshop reeked of petrol. Dolls stared down from their shelves, glassy eyes reflecting the afternoon light. In the corner, the open section of floor gaped like a wound. They took her away, Lydia said, gesturing to the hole. My Emma. Took her away in a police van like a common criminal. Even in death, she can't rest. That wasn't Emma, Miss Marple said gently. Lydia's laugh was bitter. Oh, I know what they all thought, that I didn't recognize her. But a mother knows, Miss Marple, even changed as she was. I knew my daughter. The Emma in that grave was your daughter, but not the Emma who died 30 years ago. That Emma, little Emma with the golden hair. She truly died that night, didn't she? Lydia went very still. What are you saying? I'm saying that there were two Emmas, your daughter who died in this workshop at age 6, and Cornelius's daughter, your niece, who he named after the child he'd lost. The The same violet eyes, inherited from their father. The same name, given in memory, but not the same person. The can of petrol slipped from Lydia's nerveless fingers. "No, that's not," Cornelius said. Cornelius lied. "Your Emma did die that night, exactly as you were told. The accident with the doll, the cut throat, all of it was real. But Cornelius was hiding another secret. His adult daughter, also named Emma, who he'd fathered years before with someone else. When she became pregnant by him, he used your Emma's death as cover to make his Emma disappear. But the woman in the floor was Cornelius's Emma. Your niece, not your daughter. She came back seeking revenge, and Cornelius killed her. He confessed to killing his daughter Emma, and everyone assumed he meant the child who died 30 years ago. But he meant his other daughter." Lydia sank onto a bench, tears streaming down her face. "Then my little girl has been at rest these 30 years, just as you believed. The grave you've tended, the prayers you've said, they were all for the right Emma. But I saw the photograph. The violet eyes, a family trait, passed from Cornelius to both his daughters. It's what led me to the truth. You said Emma had her mother's eyes, but your eyes are brown. She had her father's eyes, Cornelius's eyes." "Oh God!" Lydia buried her face in her hands. "All these years, and I never knew he had another daughter. Poor woman, to live with such a terrible secret, and then to die for it. The question now," Miss Marple said carefully, "is who killed Marcus?" Lydia looked up, her tear-stained face suddenly wary. "I thought, wasn't it connected to Emma's death?" "Oh, it was connected. Marcus was searching for something in this workshop, something that would prove Felicity had no right to inherit. He was very close to finding it, wasn't he?" "I don't know what you mean."
I think you do.
"You see, I believe Marcus had discovered the truth about Felicity's parentage, that she was not just Cornelius's granddaughter, but his daughter as well, product of incest. If that came out, she might be deemed unfit to inherit. The estate would go to Marcus as the only legitimate heir. That's monstrous." Lydia stood abruptly. "Felicity is innocent in all this." "Yes, which is why someone stopped Marcus before he could reveal the truth. Someone who wanted to protect Felicity. Someone who had already lost one daughter to this family's secrets and couldn't bear to see another innocent destroyed." Their eyes met across the petrol-soaked room. "You were here that night," Miss Marple continued. "You had a key. Cornelius gave keys to all the family members years ago. You knew Marcus was planning to search the workshop. Maybe you even knew about the body under the floor. He was going to ruin her," Lydia whispered. "That sweet girl who never hurt anyone. Marcus didn't care about the truth or justice. He just wanted the money. He said terrible things, that Felicity was tainted, unnatural, that she should be locked away like her mother. So you stopped him." "I only meant to frighten him. I took one of Cornelius's old tools, the silver awl. I wanted him to leave, to forget what he'd found. But he laughed at me, said I was a pathetic old woman who'd been made a fool of by my own brother. He grabbed my Emma's doll, my little girl's special doll, and said he was going to have it tested for blood evidence. Prove that the death 30 years ago wasn't an accident. He threatened the memory of your real daughter."
"Yes."
Lydia's voice was steady now. "And I couldn't let him, not Marcus, who'd never known love or loss or anything but greed. He sat down in Cornelius's chair, cradling my Emma's doll like it was a toy, mocking her memory. And I struck, just once. I didn't mean to kill him, but I'm not sorry he's dead." The confession hung between them in the petrol-heavy air. Outside, they could hear Slack's megaphone, the murmur of the crowd. "What happens now?" Lydia asked. "Now you put down the matches you're holding in your pocket," Miss Marple said calmly, "and we go outside. You'll tell Inspector Slack everything. There will be consequences, but also understanding. A jury will hear about a mother defending her daughter's memory and an innocent girl's future. Prison, perhaps. But Felicity will be free, free to live her life without the shadow of these secrets. Isn't that worth it?" Lydia smiled sadly. "You know, I think it is. My little Emma would have liked Felicity. They both love books, you see. Different Emmas, but both gentle souls in a harsh world. She walked to the door, then paused. Will you tell Felicity about her mother? I mean, not the ugly truth, but that she was loved once, before the madness took her. I'll tell her, Miss Marple promised. They emerged from the workshop to find the sun breaking through the clouds, bathing the Gothic house in golden light. Inspector Slack rushed forward, but Lydia held up her hand. I have a confession to make, she said clearly. I killed Marcus Whitlock, but first let me tell you about two little girls named Emma, and the secrets that destroyed them both. As the police led Lydia away, Miss Marple noticed Felicity standing at the edge of the crowd, her violet eyes wide with confusion and fear. She made her way over to the young woman. Is it over? Felicity asked tremulously. The murders are solved, Miss Marple said gently. But I'm afraid there's more you need to know about your mother, your grandfather, and why you were really brought to St. Mary Mead. It's not a pleasant story, but you have a right to hear it. Will knowing help? Miss Marple considered. It will hurt. Truth often does. But in my experience, it's the secrets we don't know that have the most power to harm us. You've been living in the shadow of other people's sins. Perhaps it's time to step into the light. Felicity squared her shoulders. Then tell me everything. As they walked away from the Whitlock house, leaving its dolls and shadows behind, Miss Marple reflected that justice came in many forms. Sometimes it was the law, sometimes conscience, and sometimes simply the truth finally being told. Behind them, the workshop stood empty, waiting, but the ghosts at last were laid to rest. 3 days had passed since Lydia Whitlock's arrest. The village of St. Mary Mead buzzed with gossip and speculation, but Miss Marple kept her own counsel, tending her garden and waiting. She knew from experience that after such revelations, there would be aftershocks. The first came with Dr. Haydock's visit. I've been thinking about what you said, he began, without preamble, settling heavily into her garden chair. About Cornelius being murdered. Oh, Miss Marple continued deadheading her roses, but her attention was fully on the doctor. I went back through my notes. The night Cornelius died, I received a call around 9 o'clock. Not from him. From someone claiming to be his new nurse, said he was having chest pains, but refusing to go to hospital. He didn't have a nurse. Exactly. But I didn't know that at the time. When I arrived, he was already dead. Classical presentation of massive coronary. Given his condition, I didn't question it. But now I wonder who made that call, and whether Cornelius was already dead when they did. Miss Marple set down her secateurs. Someone wanted you to find the body. Someone who knew about his heart condition, and knew you wouldn't order an autopsy. The question is, who? Dr. Haydock frowned. I've been over it again and again. The voice on the phone was muffled. Could have been male or female. What time did you pronounce death? 9:30. But rigor mortis suggested he'd been dead at least 2 hours. Maybe more. So he died around 7. Who visits at dinner time? Family, usually, or close friends. The doctor paused. Or someone he was expecting, someone he trusted enough to let in despite having just committed murder. Their eyes met in understanding. You think there was another murder, Dr. Haydock said slowly. Not just Marcus and Emma, but Cornelius too. I think, Miss Marple said carefully, that someone has been playing a very long game, and I think it's time we found out who. The second aftershock came that afternoon, in the form of Felicity Harmon. I've been cleaning out the house, she said, standing uncertainly at Miss Marple's gate, getting it ready to sell. I can't possibly live there, not after everything. Very sensible, dear. Won't you come in? Felicity followed her into the cottage, clutching a cardboard box. I found something, hidden in Cornelius's bedroom. I think you should see it. The box contained letters, dozens of them, all in the same feminine handwriting. They're from someone called Catherine, Felicity explained. They go back 30 years. Love letters, I think, but also stranger things, references to their plans, and when the truth comes out. And look at this one. She handed Miss Marple a letter dated just a month ago. My darling C. Not long now. The girl has taken the bait, as we knew she would. How could she resist the mystery of her origins? Soon she will be there, and you can begin. Remember, she must trust you completely, before the will is changed. As for E, I have located her, Switzerland, as we suspected. The facility is lax. It won't be difficult to arrange her release and transportation. She always was unstable. Who would question it if she disappeared again? 30 years we've waited. Soon, my love, we'll be together properly, without secrets, without shame. All my love, C. C for Catherine, Felicity said. But who is Catherine? Miss Marple studied the handwriting, memory stirring. She had seen it before, but where? May I keep these? She asked. I'd like to study them more carefully. Of course. Miss Marple, do you think Cornelius was as much a victim as the rest of us? I'm beginning to think everyone in this tragedy was both victim and perpetrator, Miss Marple replied. The question is determining who cast the first stone. After Felicity left, Miss Marple spread the letters across her table. The earliest ones were passionate, speaking of forbidden love and the need for secrecy. Then came references to a pregnancy, plans to hide it, protect their secret. Later letters grew darker, speaking of revenge, patience, and a long-term plan. The handwriting nagged at her, controlled, educated, but with distinctive loops on the lowercase g's and y's. Where had she seen it? Then it struck her. The library, the card catalogue that Felicity and Miss Knight maintained by hand. She reached for her telephone. Miss Knight, it's Jane Marple. I wonder if you could help me with something. The old employment records for the library. Do you still have them? Splendid. I'm particularly interested in anyone named Catherine who might have worked there. Yes, I'll wait. Minutes ticked by. Then Miss Knight's voice, excited. I found something. Catherine Morrison. She was head librarian here 30 years ago. Left quite suddenly, actually, just about the time that poor child died at the Whitlock house. Morrison, as in Dr. Morrison, who had helped fake Emma's death. Miss Knight, what did Catherine Morrison look like? Oh, I never met her. But there's a photograph in the file. Rather striking, very tall, dark hair, strong features, almost mannish, some people said. Why do you ask? But Miss Marple had already hung up. The pieces were falling into place with devastating clarity. She arrived at the library just as it was closing. Miss Knight was locking up, but she readily let Miss Marple in. The Morrison file, Miss Marple said urgently. I need to see it immediately. The photograph, when produced, showed a handsome woman in her 30s, with dark hair pulled severely back and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. But it was the note clipped to the back that made Miss Marple's blood run cold. Catherine Morrison, née Knight, changed name after marriage to Dr. Morrison, 1990. Returned to maiden name after divorce, 1992. Currently residing in London. Knight, Miss Marple said softly. Your maiden name is Knight, isn't it, Miss Knight? The assistant librarian smiled. Why, yes. Catherine is my older sister, though we haven't spoken in years. Family falling out. You know how it is. Is she still in London? Oh no, she moved back to the area about 5 years ago. Lives very quietly in that cottage on the far side of Meddenham. Keeps herself to herself. I've tried to reconcile, but she won't have it. 5 years ago, 2 years before Felicity arrived in St. Mary Mead. Miss Knight, Miss Marple said urgently, I need you to telephone Inspector Slack immediately. Tell him to meet me at the Meddenham cottage. Tell him it's about the Whitlock murders. All of them. All of them. But I thought Lydia Whitlock. Lydia killed Marcus. Yes, but I believe your sister has been orchestrating deaths for 30 years, and if I'm right, she's not finished yet. The drive to Meddenham took 20 minutes. 20 minutes in which Miss Marple pieced together the final terrible truth. Catherine Morrison, brilliant librarian, in love with Cornelius Whitlock, but Cornelius loved his daughter Emma, the adult Emma, not the child. Catherine married to the doctor, who would help cover up the scandal, using her position to manipulate events. Had she killed the child Emma, made it look like an accident to traumatize Cornelius, drive him away from his unnatural love? It hadn't worked. He'd fathered a child with the adult Emma anyway. So Catherine played the long game, helping to hide Emma away, waiting. She'd divorced Morrison, but kept the connection, found Felicity in the orphanage records, guided her to St. Mary Mead. Meanwhile, she'd arranged Emma's escape from the Swiss facility, knowing the mentally ill woman would come seeking revenge. Cornelius, faced with his returning daughter, had done exactly what Catherine expected, killed her, but then Catherine had to ensure Cornelius died too, before he could reveal the truth. A visit at dinner time, something in his tea to trigger the heart attack, the anonymous call to Dr. Haydock to ensure the body was found, but not examined too closely. Marcus's death was the only part she hadn't planned. Lydia's protective instincts had provided an unexpected bonus, removing the last threat to Felicity's inheritance. But why? Why did Catherine want Felicity to inherit? As Miss Marple's taxi pulled up to the isolated cottage, she thought she knew love and hate, twisted together over 30 years. Catherine couldn't have Cornelius, but she could have his granddaughter, shape her, mold her, eventually reveal herself as the benefactor who'd made it all possible. The cottage was dark, except for a single light in the front room. Miss Marple approached carefully, peering through the window. Two figures sat by the fire, Catherine Morrison, older but still recognizable from her photograph, and beside her, pouring tea with familiar gestures, Felicity Harmon. "No," Miss Marple breathed. She was too late. Felicity was already here, already trusting, and in Catherine's hand, catching the firelight, was a silver-handled tool from Cornelius's workshop, the same type that had killed Marcus. Miss Marple reached for the door handle, praying it was unlocked. She had to get Felicity out before... Miss Marple? She spun around. Inspector Slack stood behind her, with several constables. "Got your message. What's this about?" "The murderer is inside," Miss Marple whispered urgently. "With Felicity Harmon. We have to." A scream from inside the cottage cut her off. Without thinking, Miss Marple pushed open the door and rushed in. The police closed behind. The scene that greeted them was not what she expected. Catherine Morrison lay on the floor, the silver tool protruding from her chest. Felicity stood over her, hands bloody, face shocked. "She tried to kill me," Felicity gasped. She said I was hers now, that she'd waited 30 years to have Cornelius's child. She came at me with that thing, and You defended yourself," Miss Marple said firmly, moving to support the shaking girl. "Inspector, I think you'll find this woman is responsible for more deaths than we realized. Check her papers. I believe you'll find evidence of a very long, very patient campaign of murder." As the police swarmed the cottage, Miss Marple led Felicity outside. The young woman was sobbing now, the shock setting in. "I don't understand," she wept. "She said she loved me, said she'd done everything for me, killed for me. She loved an idea," Miss Marple said gently, "an obsession that had nothing to do with you. You were just a pawn in a game that started before you were born." "Will it ever end?" Felicity asked despairingly. "The secrets, the deaths, the horror of it all." Miss Marple looked back at the cottage, where Catherine Morrison's body was being photographed by police. The last player in the tragedy, the hidden hand that had moved all the pieces. "Yes, dear," she said finally. "It ends now. The secrets are all in the open. The dead are accounted for, and you, my dear, are free." "Free," Felicity repeated wonderingly. "I don't even know what that means anymore." "It means," Miss Marple said, "that for the first time in your life, your future is your own to write. No hidden puppet masters, no family curses, just you, and whatever life you choose to make." As they waited for the police to finish their work, Miss Marple reflected on the strange symmetry of it all. It had begun with a doll and a dead child, and ended with a woman who had tried to make a living doll of Cornelius's granddaughter. But dolls, no matter how lifelike, were not real, and Felicity, despite everything, had proven herself very real indeed, real enough to fight back, real enough to survive. In the distance, dawn was breaking over the Hampshire hills. A new day, Miss Marple thought, and for one young woman at least, a new beginning. The Dollmaker's secret vow had been fulfilled, though not in the way anyone had expected. The dead were at peace, and the living, well, the living would have to find their own way forward. But then that was what the living did. The morning after Catherine Morrison's death found Miss Marple in the Whitlock workshop, now stripped of its crime scene tape. Inspector Slack had grudgingly given her permission to examine the premises one final time before the estate was sealed for probate. "Looking for more bodies, Miss Marple?" Slack asked sourly from the doorway. "I think we've had quite enough of those." "No, Inspector. I'm looking for answers to the questions that remain." "What questions?" "Catherine Morrison killed the child Emma 30 years ago to eliminate her rival's daughter. She helped hide the adult Emma away, then arranged her return and murder. She killed Cornelius when he became a liability. Case closed."
Is it?
Miss Marple ran her fingers along the workbench where Cornelius had crafted his dolls. "Tell me, Inspector, have you wondered why Catherine kept those letters? Why she didn't destroy evidence of her crimes?" "Arrogance. Criminals often keep trophies." "Perhaps. Or perhaps she kept them because she didn't write them." Slack's face reddened. "Now see here. The handwriting matches library records." "Yes, but handwriting can be taught, especially between sisters. Miss Knight mentioned they were very close as children, before the falling out." "You're not suggesting that mousy little librarian—" "I'm suggesting, Inspector, that we've been looking at this backwards. Catherine Morrison was indeed involved, but perhaps not as the mastermind we assumed." She moved to the shelves of dolls, examining each one carefully. Cornelius was a meticulous craftsman, each doll unique, each one a work of art. "But look here." She pointed to a section of newer dolls. "These are different, cruder, made by someone imitating his style." So someone else had access to this workshop, someone who knew his techniques, his tools, his secrets. She turned to face Slack. "I believe Catherine Morrison had a partner, someone who's been hiding in plain sight all along." Before Slack could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Miss Knight appeared, carrying a tea tray. "I thought you might be thirsty," she said brightly. "Such dusty work, going through old things." "How thoughtful," Miss Marple said, accepting a cup. "Tell me, Miss Knight, when did you really last see your sister?" "Oh, years ago, as I said. We had that terrible falling out." "About Cornelius Whitlock?" Miss Knight's hand trembled slightly as she poured. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do. You see, I've been wondering about those letters. Catherine was many things, but she wasn't a romantic. Those passionate declarations, those poetic turns of phrase, they sounded more like someone who'd spent their life among books. A librarian, perhaps. A younger sister, in love with the same man as her older sister. That's absurd." "Is it? You would have been, what, 25 when little Emma died, working at the library under your sister's supervision, in love with Cornelius, but he only had eyes for his daughter. It must have been torture." Miss Knight set down the teapot with excessive care. "You have quite an imagination, Miss Marple. Catherine took the blame, didn't she, for the child's death? She loved you, despite everything. So when you killed little Emma, and it was you, wasn't it? She helped cover it up, made it look like an accident." "Prove it," Miss Knight said coldly. All pretense of friendliness gone. "The proof is in the dolls," Miss Marple said. "Cornelius made a memorial doll for little Emma after she died. But there's another doll, hidden among the newer ones. A doll with distinctive features. Shall we look?" She moved to the shelf, reaching for a particular doll. Miss Knight lunged forward, but Inspector Slack caught her arm. "None of that now," he warned. Miss Marple lifted down the doll, a young woman with light brown hair and a librarian's sensible dress. But it was the face that was revealing. Twisted with jealousy and rage, it was clearly meant to be Miss Knight herself. "Cornelius knew," Miss Marple said softly. "He made this doll as an accusation. But he could never prove it, could he? And Catherine protected you." "She was weak," Miss Knight spat. "Always was. I did what needed to be done. That child was an abomination, proof of Cornelius's unnatural obsessions. And when she was gone, did he turn to proper love? No, he found another Emma to corrupt." So you conspired with Catherine to hide her away. Catherine's husband was useful for that. But Catherine wanted to leave it there. Said we'd done enough harm. Fool, I knew Cornelius would never be free while that creature lived. So yes, I planned her return, whispered in her ear during my charitable visits to the sanitarium, told her about Felicity, about the inheritance. I knew what she'd do. And Cornelius? Digitalis in his tea. So easy with his heart condition. Catherine was supposed to be in London, the perfect alibi, but she came back early, found me here, threatened to go to the police if I didn't stop. Miss Knight laughed bitterly, as if I could stop after 30 years. So you killed your own sister. She betrayed me, just like all the others. But I made her write those letters first, implicating herself. Then I waited for the right moment. When Felicity came to the cottage, I knew it was time. Catherine would attack her, Felicity would defend herself, and I would be free. The grieving sister, too shocked to suspect. Except I survived, said a quiet voice from the doorway. They all turned. Felicity stood there, pale but composed. You killed my mother, she said to Miss Knight. My grandmother, my great-aunt, all for a man who never loved you. He would have, Miss Knight shrieked. If not for all of you, his unnatural spawn. She wrenched free from Slack and grabbed one of Cornelius's tools from the workbench, but this time she didn't attack. Instead, she pressed it to her own throat. No, Inspector Slack shouted, but it was too late. Miss Knight collapsed, blood spreading across the workshop floor. Dr. Haydock, who had accompanied Felicity, rushed forward, but shook his head after a brief examination. Gone, he said quietly. Perhaps it's better this way.
Better?
Felicity asked, her voice hollow. Than a trial, Miss Marple said gently, where all the sordid details would be dragged out again. Your grandfather's crimes, your mother's madness. This way, it truly ends. They stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by the watching dolls. Then Felicity walked to the shelf and took down the memorial doll of little Emma, the child whose death had started it all. I'm going to bury her properly, she said. With her mother, they should be together. What about the estate? Inspector Slack asked. The house? The workshop? Felicity looked around the room that had seen so much death. Burn it, she said flatly. Burn it all. Give the insurance money to charity. I want nothing from this place but the truth. As they filed out of the workshop, Miss Marple noticed one last thing. On Cornelius's workbench, partially hidden under scattered tools, was an unfinished doll. It had violet eyes and a gentle face, clearly meant to be Felicity. But unlike his other creations, this one was smiling. A grandfather's last gift to the granddaughter he'd never known how to love properly. A promise of something better, even if he hadn't lived to see it fulfilled. Miss Marple quietly pocketed the doll's head. Later, she would give it to Felicity. Not now, when the wounds were too fresh, but someday, a reminder that even in the darkest stories, there could be moments of light. Outside, the sun was shining on St. Mary Mead. The Gothic house loomed against the sky, but it no longer seemed threatening, just sad and tired, and ready for its long sleep. Will you be all right? Miss Marple asked Felicity. The young woman considered. I don't know, but I think I'd like to find out. Away from here, somewhere no one knows about the Whitlocks or their secrets. A fresh start. Yes. Felicity managed a small smile. My mother never got one. Neither did my grandmother. But maybe I can. For all of us. As they walked away from the Whitlock house for the last time, Miss Marple reflected that justice took many forms. Sometimes it was the law. Sometimes it was truth. And sometimes it was simply the chance to begin again. Behind them, the workshop door swung shut with a final click. The dolls remained on their shelves, waiting in the darkness, but their maker was gone. Their secrets were told, and their long vigil was finally over. In a week, the house would burn, a controlled demolition that would send smoke rising over St. Mary Mead like a funeral pyre. The villagers would gather to watch, some with relief, some with regret, and when it was done, only an empty lot would remain. ready for something new to grow. But that was still to come. For now, there was only a young woman walking toward her future, an elderly lady returning to her roses, and the quiet understanding that sometimes the best mysteries were the ones that ended not with triumph, but with peace. The day of the scheduled demolition arrived, grey and still, as if the weather itself was holding its breath. Miss Marple stood with the gathered villagers at a safe distance from the Whitlock house, watching the fire brigade make their final preparations. "Seems a waste," Mrs. Bantry murmured beside her. "All that history going up in smoke." "Some history is better forgotten," Miss Marple replied, though her eyes were sad. Felicity stood apart from the crowd, Dr. Haydock at her side. She had returned from London specifically for this moment, looking healthier than Miss Marple had seen her. The haunted look was fading from her violet eyes. "Miss Marple," Inspector Slack approached, looking uncharacteristically subdued. "Thought you should know. We've finished going through Miss Knight's cottage, found journals going back 30 years. You were right about everything." "Oh." "She documented it all. Every plot, every plan. Seems she thought she was writing some sort of Gothic romance with herself, as the heroine." He shook his head. "Mad as a hatter, but clever with it. Without your insights." "We all did our part, Inspector." "Yes, well." He cleared his throat awkwardly. "The Chief Constable wants to thank you personally. There's talk of a commendation." "How kind." "But I'd rather not, if it's all the same. I'm just an elderly lady who notices things." Slack almost smiled. "If you say so, Miss Marple." A bell rang out. The signal for the burning to begin. The crowd fell silent as the first flames appeared in the ground floor windows. The fire had been carefully set by professionals, designed to consume the house completely, while remaining controlled. "Look!" someone whispered. The workshop. The flames had reached Cornelius's sanctuary, and through the windows they could see an extraordinary sight. As the fire consumed the dolls, their wax faces seemed to come alive, melting and shifting in the heat. For a moment, it looked as if they were dancing. "Beautiful and terrible," Lydia Whitlock said quietly. She had been released on bail, awaiting trial for Marcus's murder. Her lawyers were confident of a manslaughter verdict, given the circumstances. Cornelius would have appreciated the artistry of it. "You've forgiven him?" Miss Marple asked. "I've forgiven everyone," Lydia said simply. "Even myself. Prison gives you time to think. And I've realized something. We were all prisoners long before I was arrested. Prisoners of secrets, of shame, of the past. At least now we're free." The upper floors caught now, flames reaching toward the grey sky. The Gothic turrets that had loomed over St. Mary Mead for so long began to crumble. "There goes the tower room," Jim Barnes observed. "Where old Cornelius used to stand and watch the village. Always gave me the shivers, seeing him up there." Miss Marple remembered something. "Mr. Barnes, you've worked at the house for many years. Did you ever notice anything odd about the dolls? Any that seemed different from the others?" Jim scratched his head. "Funny you should ask. There was one Mr. Cornelius was working on right before he died. Kept it locked in a special cabinet. Said it was his masterpiece, but I never saw it finished." "What happened to it?" "Don't rightly know. Cabinet was empty when we cleared the workshop. Figured he'd destroyed it." But Miss Marple wondered. She still had the unfinished doll head in her cottage. The one meant to be Felicity. Had there been another, a final creation, hidden somewhere? Her thoughts were interrupted by a commotion in the crowd. A stranger had pushed through a woman in her 50s with greying hair and a worn coat. "Stop!" she cried out. "You can't burn it. Not yet." Inspector Slack moved to intercept her. "Madam, this is a controlled demolition. You need to step back." "You don't understand," the woman said desperately. "I'm Emma Sinclair, the real Emma, and I need to get something from that house." A shocked silence fell over the crowd. Miss Marple studied the newcomer carefully. The bone structure was right, and there was something about the eyes. "Impossible," Dr. Haydock said. "Emma Sinclair is dead. I saw the body myself." "You saw a body," the woman corrected, "but it wasn't mine. I can prove it. I have papers, medical records from the sanitarium. I escaped 3 months ago, but when I came here, I found another woman claiming to be me. She had my documents, knew things only I should know. I've been hiding, trying to understand. Then who did Cornelius kill? Inspector Slack demanded.
I don't know. That's what I've been trying to find out.
But there's something in the house, something Cornelius left for me. He wrote to me at the sanitarium, just before he died, said he'd hidden the truth where only I would look. Please, you have to let me. But it was too late. With a great roar, the roof collapsed inward, sending a shower of sparks into the sky. The house was fully engulfed now, beyond saving. The woman who claimed to be Emma fell to her knees, sobbing. It's gone. The proof is gone. No one will believe me now. Miss Marple approached her slowly. Where did Cornelius say he'd hidden it? His exact words? Emma looked up, tears streaming down her face. He said, I've left the truth with our daughter. She keeps all my secrets now. Our daughter? Miss Marple repeated thoughtfully. But Felicity is here, and she has no secrets from Cornelius. He didn't mean Felicity, Emma said bitterly. He meant the other one, the doll he made of our child, the one that looked exactly like her, so lifelike that people were disturbed by it. He never sold it, never displayed it, said it was too personal. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. A doll of your daughter. What did it look like? Like Felicity, but younger. Maybe 18 or 19. Violet eyes, auburn hair, wearing a white christening gown that I'd saved. Emma's voice broke. He made it after I was sent away, his way of keeping her close, he said in his letters. Miss Marple, Jim Barnes said suddenly. That's the doll I was talking about, the one in the locked cabinet, but I swear it wasn't there when we cleared the room. No, Miss Marple said slowly, because someone had already taken it, someone who knew its significance. She turned to study the crowd, her keen eyes moving from face to face. Most were watching the fire, but one person was edging away, trying to slip unnoticed through the throng. Mr. Pennyweather, Miss Marple called out. A moment, please. The solicitor froze, then turned with a forced smile. Miss Marple, I really must be going. Urgent business. I think your business is here, Inspector Slack said, moving to block his path. What do you know about this missing doll? I don't know what you mean, Pennyweather said, but sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air. I think you do, Miss Marple said. You were Cornelius's solicitor. You had access to the house, and you knew about the inheritance long before anyone else. That proves nothing. Perhaps not, but I wonder what we'd find if we searched your office. A valuable doll, perhaps. One containing documents that prove this woman's identity. Pennyweather's composure cracked. You don't understand. I've worked for the Whitlock family for 40 years, kept their secrets, cleaned up their messes, and what did I get? A pittance, while that girl inherits millions. So you stole the doll. I took what I was owed. Cornelius promised me I'd be taken care of. Then he changed his will and left me nothing. Nothing but that doll. Collectors would pay a fortune for Cornelius Whitlock's final masterpiece. Except it wasn't just a doll, was it? Miss Marple said. Cornelius hid something inside it. Documents? Proof of Emma's identity. Pennyweather's silence was answer enough. Sergeant Inspector Slack barked. Take Mr. Pennyweather to the station. We'll be wanting to search his premises immediately. As the solicitor was led away, the woman claiming to be Emma stood slowly. Then there's hope? The proof might still exist? We'll find out soon enough, Slack said, not unkindly. In the meantime, you'd better come to the station too. We'll need to verify your story. The crowd began to disperse as the fire settled into a controlled burn. Soon only a few remained. Miss Marple, Felicity, Dr. Haydock, and the woman who might be Emma. I don't understand, Felicity said, staring at the woman. If you're my mother, then who did grandfather kill? Emma studied her daughter's face hungrily. You have my eyes, she whispered, but you look like him too. Around the jaw, the way you hold your head. That's not an answer. I know, Emma sighed. I don't have answers, only questions. Who was the woman who came here, claiming to be me? How did she know so much about my life? Why did Cornelius believe she was me? Miss Marple had been thinking, "Tell me, Emma, did you have any close friends at the sanitarium? Anyone you confided in?" Emma frowned. There was one woman, Maria. She'd been there even longer than me. We became close over the years. I told her everything about Cornelius, about the baby, about my plans to escape and find my daughter. She was going to come with me, but she died 3 months before I escaped. Heart attack, they said. Very sudden. Emma paused. Actually, now that I think about it, she looked a bit like me. Same height, same build. Her hair was darker, but hair can be dyed, Miss Marple murmured, and a woman who'd listened to your stories for years would know exactly what to say, how to act. You think Maria faked her death? Dr. Haydock asked skeptically. I think someone helped her fake it, someone who needed a convincing Emma to complete their plan. Miss Marple looked at the burning house. We may never know the full truth, but I suspect Miss Knight wasn't working alone. She needed someone to play Emma, someone who could convincingly demand revenge. Maria, desperate to escape, would have been perfect. But Cornelius killed her, Felicity said. Why would she agree to a plan that ended in her death? I don't think that was the plan. I think Maria was supposed to frighten Cornelius, perhaps blackmail him, but something went wrong. Maybe she began to believe she really was Emma. Maybe she demanded more than Miss Knight had promised. Either way, she became a liability. And Cornelius's confession, written under extreme distress, possibly even coercion. Miss Knight was there that night. We know that now. She could have forced him to write it before killing him. They stood in silence, watching the last of the Whitlock house crumble into ash and ember. 3 generations of women, bound by blood and lies, finally facing the truth. What happens now? Felicity asked her mother. Emma reached out tentatively, and after a moment's hesitation, Felicity took her hand. Now, Emma said, we learn who we really are, without the secrets, without the lies, just us. It won't be easy, Miss Marple warned. The past casts long shadows. But shadows need light to exist, Emma replied. And look at the sun's coming out. Indeed it was. The grey clouds were parting, and afternoon sunlight slanted across the ruins of the Whitlock house, where once Gothic towers had loomed. Now there was only open sky. Come, Dr. Haydock said gruffly. Let's get you both some tea. You can start your reconciliation somewhere warmer than a demolition site. As they walked away, Miss Marple lingered, watching the fire brigade begin their final safety checks. In her pocket, the unfinished doll's head seemed to pulse with warmth, or perhaps that was just the heat from the dying fire. Tomorrow, Inspector Slack would search Pennyweather's office. The stolen doll would be found, along with documents that confirmed Emma's identity and revealed more secrets. The solicitor would confess to theft and attempted fraud. Lydia would plead guilty to manslaughter and receive a suspended sentence. The village would gossip for months. But today, a mother and daughter were walking together for the first time in 25 years. It wasn't a happy ending. Too much pain lay between then and now for that. But it was an ending, and more importantly, a beginning. Miss Marple turned away from the smoking ruins and headed home to her garden. There would be time enough tomorrow to give Felicity the doll's head, to explain its significance, time enough for all the questions that remained. For now she was content to know that the shadows over St. Mary Mead had lifted at last. The dollmaker's secrets were revealed, his vow fulfilled in ways he never imagined. And in her cottage garden, the late roses bloomed on, untouched by the smoke and sorrow, reminding her that life in the end was always stronger than death. 3 weeks after the burning of the Whitlock house, Miss Marple received an urgent telephone call from Inspector Slack. You'll want to see this, he said without preamble. We've found something in Pennyweather's doll, something that changes everything. Within the hour, Miss Marple was seated in the police station, examining the carefully dismantled doll. It was indeed a masterpiece, so lifelike that it seemed to breathe, but it was the hidden compartment in its chest that held the real treasure. Letters, Slack explained, spreading them on the table. Dozens of them, and photographs. And this, He held up a small leather journal. Cornelius Whitlock's real confession, not the one we found before. That was written under duress. Just as you suspected. This is the truth. Miss Marple took the journal with careful hands. Cornelius's familiar handwriting filled the pages, but these words were measured, deliberate. If you are reading this, then I am dead, and my deepest shame has come to light. I write this, not for forgiveness. I deserve none, but so that the innocent might know the truth. First, I must confess, Emma is not my daughter. This lie has poisoned 3 generations, but it began with my father. Miss Marple looked up sharply. His father? Keep reading, Slack urged. My father, Augustus Whitlock, was a man of violent appetites and no conscience. When I was 12, he brought home a young governess named Mary Sinclair. She was beautiful, accomplished, and entirely at his mercy. What he did to her, I tried to stop him once. He broke my arm and locked me in the cellar for a week. Mary became pregnant. My father's wife had died years before, so there was no one to protect her. When the child was born, a daughter, my father decided to raise her as his own. He told the world he had adopted an orphan. Mary was sent away with threats of ruin if she ever returned. That child was Lydia. Dear God, Miss Marple murmured. Lydia was Cornelius's half-sister, not his full sister. There's more, Slack said grimly. Lydia grew up believing the adoption story. She was beautiful like her mother, and kind. I loved her, not as a brother should, but as a man loves a woman. It was wrong, but I didn't know then that we shared blood. My father told me nothing. When Lydia was 18, she fell in love with George Sinclair, Mary's brother, though neither of us knew it then. They married, and I thought my torment would end. But George died in the war, and Lydia came home to grieve. One night, in our mutual sorrow, I cannot write it. 9 months later, Emma was born. My daughter and my niece. Lydia still didn't know I was her half-brother. I couldn't tell her, it would have destroyed her. I watched Emma grow, loving her and hating myself. When she was 6, I decided to tell Lydia everything. But that night, before I could speak, Emma found the dolls in my workshop. The one with the blue dress had a sharp edge where the porcelain had cracked. She cut herself trying to hold it. It should have been a minor wound, but something went wrong. An infection, Dr. Morrison said. She died within hours. God's punishment for my sins. Miss Marple set down the journal, her mind reeling. So little Emma's death really was an accident. But everyone lied about it, Slack said. Look at this letter from Dr. Morrison. The doctor's confession was clinical in its precision. Cornelius came to me in hysteria. The child was dead, but he insisted we tell people it happened instantly. He couldn't bear for anyone to know she had suffered. I agreed. What difference did it make? But then he told me about Lydia, about their relationship. He was terrified the truth would come out if there was an investigation. I should have refused, but Cornelius had evidence of my own indiscretions. Gambling debts, opium use, so I helped him craft the story of a tragic accident. Quick death, closed casket, no questions asked. Blackmail, Miss Marple observed. It seems to have been the Whitlock family currency. Wait until you see this, Slack said, producing a photograph. Found hidden in the doll's hair. It was a group portrait. 3 women standing in the gardens of what looked like a sanitarium. Miss Marple recognized the woman in the center immediately. That's Emma, the real Emma, who came to the fire. But who are the others? According to the inscription on the back, the one on the left is Maria Vance, the woman we think impersonated Emma, and the one on the right, Slack paused dramatically. Is Catherine Knight, not Morrison? She never married Dr. Morrison. That was another lie. Miss Marple studied the photograph. Catherine Knight looked nothing like the description they'd been given. She was small, fair-haired, almost fragile-looking. Then who was the woman who died in the cottage? The one we thought was Catherine. We're still trying to determine that, but look at this letter, found with the photograph. Dear Cornelius, the handwriting was different from the previous Catherine letters. I am dying. The cancer gives me perhaps a month. Before I go, I must confess my part in this tragedy. I was Maria's nurse at the sanitarium. She was my special project, a woman who had lost herself so completely that she would believe anything I told her. I shaped her into a weapon aimed at your heart. You see, I loved your Emma, not with a mother's love or a nurse's compassion, but with a passion that consumed me. When she spoke of you, her father, her lover, her destroyer, I wanted to kill you, but Emma begged me not to. Even after everything, she loved you. So I waited. I planned. When Emma discovered she was dying, weak heart, the doctors said, damaged by years of trauma, she made me promise to protect Felicity, to ensure the girl got what was rightfully hers. I recruited Maria and my sister, told them different stories, made them believe they were righting different wrongs. My sister thought she was avenging a murdered child. Maria thought she was escaping to freedom. Neither knew the real plan. By the time you read this, it will be over. Maria will have played her part and died for it. My sister will have killed you, believing herself a hero, and I will have disappeared. My death faked with the help of friends at the sanitarium. Except the cancer is real. God's joke, perhaps. I write this confession because Emma would have wanted the truth known. She died 2 days ago, holding a picture of the daughter she never knew. Her last words were, "Tell Felicity I loved her. Do with this knowledge what you will." I go to join my beloved Emma, unrepentant, except for the pain caused to innocence. Catherine Knight. So the real Catherine Knight orchestrated everything from the sanitarium, Miss Marple said slowly, using her dying patient's story as the blueprint for revenge. But who killed Marcus? Slack asked. And who was the woman in the cottage if not Catherine? Before Miss Marple could answer, there was a commotion outside. A constable entered, escorting a woman Miss Marple recognized with shock. "Miss Knight," she exclaimed. "But you're dead." The assistant librarian smiled wanly. "Reports of my death were a necessary deception. I've come to confess properly this time, to everything." She sat down heavily, looking far older than her years. "Catherine was my sister, but I haven't seen her in decades. The woman who died in the workshop, who everyone thought was me, was an actress named Helen Marsh. I hired her to play me for the final act." "You faked your own death?" "It was supposed to be simple. Helen would threaten Felicity with the weapon. I would appear and save her, and Helen would escape in the confusion. Instead, Miss Knight shrugged. Helen got too into her role. She really tried to kill Felicity. The girl defended herself, and Helen died wearing my face." "But why?" Miss Marple asked. "Because I was tired of being Catherine's puppet. She'd controlled me my entire life, even from that sanitarium, made me believe I was avenging little Emma, when really I was just another tool in her revenge plot. When I realized the truth, I wanted out, but the only way to escape Catherine was to die. Where is the real Catherine now?" "Dead. She died a week ago in Switzerland. The cancer as she predicted, but she left one last surprise." Miss Knight produced an envelope. Her final confession, the real one. Miss Marple took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in spidery handwriting. "I lied. Emma Sinclair, my patient, my obsession, died giving birth to Felicity. She never knew her daughter survived. I told Cornelius she lived because I wanted him to suffer, to believe she was out there, hating him. I invented the escape, the return, the vengeful Emma. Maria Vance was never meant to impersonate anyone. She was just a mad woman I convinced to play a role. When Cornelius killed her, believing her to be Emma, it was exactly what I wanted. He would die knowing he had killed his daughter. Except my sister failed me. She fell in love with Cornelius herself. Instead of letting him suffer, she killed him quickly, ruined my beautiful revenge. So I improvised. Let the game play out. Let them all destroy each other. And now I die, taking the last truth with me. Felicity Harmon is nobody's daughter. She was a foundling, chosen because she had violet eyes like Emma's. I falsified the records, created a history, made everyone believe she was Emma's child. But she's not. She's just an orphan who got lucky. Or perhaps unlucky. You decide. C.K. The confession fluttered from Miss Marple's numb fingers. Around the table, faces registered shock, disbelief, horror. "It can't be true," Slack said finally. "We have DNA evidence." "Do we?" Miss Knight interrupted. "Or do we have tests that Catherine arranged? Results that Catherine interpreted? She had contacts everywhere. She'd been planning this for decades." "But Felicity looks like Emma," Miss Marple protested. Though even as she spoke, she remembered how many people had violet eyes, how suggestion could make one see resemblances that weren't there. "Does she? Or did we just want to see it?" Miss Knight shook her head. Catherine was a master manipulator. She knew exactly what stories to tell, what evidence to plant. Even I believed it all, until I found her journals. "Then Felicity inherits a fortune based on a lie," Slack said heavily. "Does it matter?" a quiet voice asked from the doorway. They all turned. Felicity stood there, with the woman they now knew to be the real Emma beside her. Both women looked calm, almost serene. "How long have you been listening?" Miss Marple asked gently. "Long enough," Felicity replied. "And you know what? I don't care if I'm not her biological daughter. These past weeks, getting to know Emma, hearing her stories, sharing our pain, we've become family in every way that matters." Emma nodded. "I lost my real daughter at birth, but I found this remarkable young woman who might or might not share my blood, but definitely shares my spirit. If that's not family, what is?" "But the inheritance," Slack began. "Goes to charity," Felicity said firmly. "I never wanted it anyway. I came to St. Mary Mead, looking for family, for roots, for belonging. I found horror and death instead. But I also found Emma, and that's worth more than any fortune." Miss Knight laughed bitterly. Catherine would hate this. Her perfect revenge, ruined by love and forgiveness. How wonderfully ironic. "What will happen to you?" Miss Marple asked her. "Prison, I suppose. I did help orchestrate several murders, even if I was manipulated into it. But at least Catherine can't control me anymore. That's its own freedom." As the police led Miss Knight away and the others dispersed, Miss Marple found herself alone with Felicity and Emma in the station's small garden. "Will you stay in St. Mary Mead?" she asked. "No," Emma said. "Too many ghosts. We're going to travel. See the world I missed while locked away. Make new memories to replace the old nightmares." "Together," Felicity added, linking arms with Emma, mother and daughter, even if it's not by blood. Miss Marple smiled. "Family is more than blood, my dears. It's choice, and love, and the courage to hold on to each other despite everything." As they parted ways, Miss Marple reflected on the strange journey that had begun with a simple inheritance and ended with the unraveling of decades of lies. The Whitlock house was gone, its secrets exposed, its ghosts laid to rest. But from its ashes had come something unexpected, a family forged not by blood but by choice. She thought of Catherine Knight, dying alone in Switzerland, her elaborate revenge ultimately meaningless. She thought of Cornelius, tormented by sins both real and imagined. She thought of all the victims, little Emma, Maria Vance, Marcus, Helen Marsh, all sacrificed to one woman's obsession. But mostly she thought of Felicity and Emma, walking into their future together, proof that love could bloom even in the darkest soil. The Dollmaker's vow had been kept, though not in any way he could have imagined. His legacy was not money or property, or even the truth. It was two women choosing to be family despite everything that argued against it. And that, Miss Marple decided as she headed home to her roses, was the only ending that really mattered. 6 months had passed since the burning of the Whitlock house. The village of St. Mary Mead had settled back into its customary rhythms, the scandal now reduced to occasional whispers over tea. Miss Marple was in her garden, preparing her roses for the autumn show, when an unexpected visitor arrived. Miss Marple, the young man was perhaps 30, with sandy hair and nervous hands. "My name is James Morrison. I believe you knew my grandfather, Dr. Morrison." Miss Marple set down her pruning shears. "Indeed I did. Won't you come in? I was just about to make tea." "Over Earl Grey and seed cake," James Morrison explained his purpose. "Grandfather died last month. When we were clearing his house, we found a safety deposit box we didn't know existed. Inside was this letter, addressed to you. The envelope was yellowed with age, marked to be delivered to Miss Jane Marple only upon my death. Dr. Harold Morrison. How extraordinary, Miss Marple murmured. Your grandfather has been dead these 15 years, yet he left this with you. Actually, no. He left it with a law firm, with instructions to pass it to his oldest living descendant when he died, along with very specific delivery instructions. It's taken them 6 months to track me down. Miss Marple opened the letter with careful fingers. Asterisk. Dear Miss Marple, if you are reading this, then the Whitlock tragedy has likely played out to its terrible conclusion. I write this in 1994, knowing that someday the truth will surface, and hoping that when it does, someone with your wisdom will be there to understand. You will have discovered by now that I helped fake young Emma's death. What you won't know is why I agreed to such a monstrous deception. The truth is more terrible than any lie we told. Augustus Whitlock was not just violent, he was systematically evil. The governess, Mary Sinclair, was not his only victim. There were others, many others. Young women who disappeared, servants who left suddenly in the night. I was young then, new to the village, but I heard whispers. When Cornelius came to me, that awful night with Emma's body, I saw my chance, not to help him, but to end the Whitlock line. You see, I had examined the child's body. The cut was not from a doll. The wound pattern was consistent with a surgical scalpel. My scalpel, which had gone missing from my bag earlier that day. I believe Cornelius killed his daughter in a moment of madness, then constructed the doll story to explain it. But I had no proof, and accusing him would have meant revealing my own complicity in covering up his father's crimes. So I helped him. I falsified records. I lied, but I also did something else. I made sure that every Whitlock woman who came to me was given a special tonic, a harmless herbal mixture, I told them. In reality, it was a contraceptive, undetectable, irreversible, after prolonged use. Lydia Whitlock never knew why she couldn't have more children after Emma. The adult Emma Cess Cornelius's daughter never knew why she miscarried repeatedly until that final pregnancy that produced Felicity. I made sure the Whitlock line would wither and die, but I underestimated the family's capacity for self-destruction. They didn't need my help to destroy themselves. They managed quite well on their own. I tell you this now because I believe someone should know the full truth. Not for justice, it's far too late for that. But for understanding. The Whitlock family was cursed, not by fate, but by the evil of one man, Augustus, whose poison infected every generation that followed. I do not ask for forgiveness. I played God with people's lives, violated my oath as a physician, but I sleep soundly, knowing that no more children will suffer as Emma did. If Felicity Harmon truly is a Whitlock descendant, watch her carefully. The poison may run in blood, as well as deed, but if she is the foundling that Catherine Knight claimed, then perhaps there is hope. Perhaps an innocent soul can redeem a cursed inheritance. I leave this truth in your capable hands. Dr. Harold Morrison, asterisk. Miss Marple set down the letter, her mind working through the implications. Another layer of deception, another secret revealed. But this one cast new light on everything. My God, James Morrison said, reading her expression. What did my grandfather do? What he thought was right, Miss Marple said carefully. Though whether it was right or not, that's a question for philosophers, not elderly ladies who grow roses. After James left, Miss Marple sat in her garden, thinking. The letter changed everything and nothing. The crimes were still crimes, the victims still dead, but the motivations, the fears that drove people to desperate acts, those were clearer now. She was interrupted by the telephone. It was Inspector Slack, sounding unusually subdued. Thought you should know, he said. We've had the DNA tests redone by an independent lab. 3 different facilities, actually. The results are inconsistent. Inconsistent how? One says Felicity is definitely Emma's daughter. One says she's definitely not. The third says the samples were too degraded to determine anything conclusively. It's as if, he paused, as if someone deliberately contaminated the evidence to make it impossible to prove either way. Catherine Knight's final joke, Miss Marple murmured. The real question is, what do we do about it? Felicity's already given away the inheritance, so there's no financial fraud. And she and Emma have legally adopted each other as family, so relationship fraud doesn't apply. Do we tell them the tests are inconclusive? What would be the point? Miss Marple asked. They've chosen to be family. The blood doesn't matter anymore. I suppose you're right. Oh, and Miss Marple, there's one more thing. We found another letter in Catherine Knight's effects. It's, well, you should see it yourself. An hour later, Miss Marple sat in the police station, reading Catherine Knight's true final confession. Asterisk, to whom it may concern. By now you will have found my other confession, the one claiming Felicity is not Emma's daughter. I lied. Or perhaps I told the truth. I honestly can't remember anymore. You see, I've spent so long weaving lies and truth together that they've become indistinguishable. Did I fake the DNA tests? Did I switch babies at the orphanage? Did I choose a random girl with violet eyes? All of these things are possible. I certainly had the means and opportunity. But here's the beautiful irony. It doesn't matter. Whatever the biological truth, Felicity has become Emma's daughter through choice, through love, through shared pain, and mutual healing. The family I tried to destroy has reformed itself, stronger for being chosen rather than imposed. I spent my life seeking revenge for a woman who just wanted to be loved. Emma didn't want elaborate schemes or destroyed lives. She wanted her daughter to be safe and happy. In the end, despite all my manipulations, that's exactly what happened. So believe whatever truth comforts you. Felicity is Emma's daughter. Felicity is a stranger. Felicity is both and neither. In the quantum uncertainty of identity, all possibilities exist until observed, and I have made sure the observation can never be definitive. My gift to them, the only honest gift I ever gave, is the freedom to choose their own truth. Catherine Knight, or someone claiming to be her, you'll never really know, will you? Monstrous woman, Slack muttered. Even in death, she won't let us have certainty. But Miss Marple was smiling slightly. Perhaps that's the point, Inspector. Perhaps certainty isn't what they need. She thought of Felicity and Emma, last seen boarding a ship for Greece, laughing together over a shared joke. Two women who had found each other across decades of lies and pain. Did it matter if they shared DNA? Did it matter if their connection was blood or choice? What will you put in the official report? She asked. Slack sighed. That the evidence is inconclusive, but irrelevant. That all guilty parties have been identified and appropriately dealt with. That the case of the Whitlock murders is closed. Very wise. As Miss Marple walked home through the peaceful village, she reflected on the strange saga that had begun with the Dollmaker's unexpected bequest. So many secrets revealed, so many lies exposed. But in the end, the most profound truth was the simplest, that love could grow even in the most poisoned ground, that families could be made as well as born, that redemption was possible even for the descendants of monsters. She paused at the site where the Whitlock house had stood. The ground had been cleared and levelled, and someone, the parish council, perhaps, had planted roses. They were just beginning to bloom, pink and white and deep red, their perfume sweet in the evening air. How appropriate, Miss Marple murmured. Miss Marple. She turned to find the vicar approaching. Ah, Mr. Clement, admiring the new garden? It was Felicity's idea, actually. She sent money from Greece with instructions to plant a rose garden. Said she wanted something beautiful to grow where so much ugliness had been. Did she specify the varieties? Yes, actually. Rather poetic names. Compassion, New Dawn, and... He consulted a paper from his pocket. Remember me. Miss Marple smiled. Trust a librarian to understand the language of flowers. Compassion for the victims. New dawn for the future. And remember me for the past that must not be forgotten, even as it was forgiven. Oh, and she sent this for you. The vicar handed her a small package. Inside was a photographs. Felicity and Emma on the deck of a ship, the Mediterranean sparkling behind them. They were laughing, arms around each other, looking for all the world like any mother and daughter on holiday. On the back, in Felicity's neat handwriting, "Dear Miss Marple, thank you for helping us find our truth. Even if we'll never know the facts, Emma sends her love and says to tell you that your roses are nothing compared to the ones in Crete." She's wrong, of course. We've decided to settle in a small village overlooking the sea. No secrets, no dollmakers, no Gothic mansions. Just books and sunshine and the family we've chosen to be. Perhaps one day you'll visit. Until then, know that every mystery you solved led us to each other, and for that, we are forever grateful. With love and admiration, Felicity and Emma. P.S. We've adopted a cat. We named her Jane. Miss Marple tucked the photograph into her pocket, blinking away what might have been tears. Tomorrow there would be new mysteries, new secrets to unravel, new truths to discover. But tonight she was content knowing that somewhere across the sea, two women had found peace. As she entered her cottage, she glanced back one more time at the rose garden growing where the Whitlock house had stood. The dollmaker's vow had been fulfilled in ways no one could have imagined. The secrets were all told, the dead were at rest, and the living had found their way to happiness. And in St. Mary Mead, where nothing ever happened and everything was possible, the roses bloomed on. 1 year to the day after the Whitlock house burned, Miss Marple was surprised by an early morning visitor. The postman handed her a large package, postmarked from Switzerland, but with no return address. "Heavy, that one," he commented. "And insured for a small fortune, had to be signed for special." Miss Marple carried the package to her parlor, studying it carefully. The handwriting on the label was unfamiliar, but something about it made her pulse quicken. She opened it with deliberate care. Inside, wrapped in layers of silk, was a doll, but this was no ordinary doll. It was clearly one of Cornelius Whitlock's creations, but unlike any she had seen before, the face was exquisitely crafted, neither young nor old, with features that seemed to shift in the changing light. Sometimes it looked like Emma, sometimes like Felicity, sometimes like a stranger altogether. The eyes were violet, but deep within the glass, other colors swirled, brown and green and grey. A letter was tucked into the doll's elaborate Victorian dress. *, Dear Miss Marple, you do not know me, but I know you. I am Sister Marguerite of the convent of St. Catherine in Switzerland. For 40 years, I have served as nurse, confessor and keeper of secrets at the sanatorium adjoining our convent. I am dying now, and with death approaching, I must unburden myself of the last secret of the Whitlock tragedy. Catherine Knight was my patient for many years, but she was more than that. She was my friend, my confessor, and eventually, my co-conspirator. You see, I too had loved someone I shouldn't have. I too had lost everything to the cruelty of those who judge what they don't understand. When Catherine told me her plan for revenge, I didn't try to stop her. Instead, I helped her. I provided the medical knowledge, the forged documents, the connections she needed. I am as guilty as she of the chaos that followed. But I write not to confess my crimes. God will judge those soon enough. I write to tell you about this doll. Cornelius Whitlock didn't make it. Catherine did. She was a woman of many talents, our Catherine. During her years in the sanatorium, she studied Cornelius's techniques obsessively, practicing on materials I smuggled in for her. This doll was her masterpiece, created in the months before her death. My truth, she called it. The only honest thing I've ever made. She told me the doll contained something important, but she wouldn't say what. Only that it should go to you when both she and I were dead, that you would know what to do with it. I have examined it carefully, but found no hidden compartments, no secret messages. Perhaps the doll itself is the message, or perhaps Catherine's madness had consumed even this final gesture. I leave it in your hands, Miss Marple, along with my prayers for forgiveness for all of us who turned love into weapon and grief into poison. May God have mercy on our souls. Sister Marguerite *. Miss Marple set the letter aside and examined the doll more carefully. It was indeed a masterwork, but there was something unsettling about it. The face that changed depending on the angle, the eyes that seemed to hold depths within depths. She was about to set it aside when her fingers found a tiny irregularity in the fabric of the dress, a seam that didn't quite match the others. Carefully she unpicked the threads. Inside was a single human hair, golden blonde, tied with a microscopic ribbon. A child's hair, preserved for decades, and wrapped around the hair, a strip of paper so small she needed her magnifying glass to read it. Emma Sinclair, aged 6. The only innocent in this story, the only truth that matters. Miss Marple sat back, understanding flooding through her. This wasn't just a doll, it was a memorial. Catherine's way of acknowledging that at the heart of all the elaborate revenge, all the lies and manipulations, was one simple tragedy, a child's death. But there was more. As she held the hair up to the light, she noticed something else. The ribbon wasn't just any ribbon. It was woven with 2 different colored threads, twisted together so tightly they appeared as one, red and white, blood and innocence. The doorbell interrupted her thoughts. It was Inspector Slack, looking unusually formal. "Miss Marple, sorry to disturb you, but there's been a development. We've been contacted by a law firm in Switzerland. Apparently there's been a bequest." A bequest? From Catherine Knight. She left her entire estate, which is surprisingly substantial, to establish a charity. A home for children who've lost their families to violence. She named you as the sole trustee. Miss Marple looked at the doll in her hands, then at the inspector. How very unexpected. "There's a condition," Slack continued. "The home must be built here, in St. Mary Mead, on the site of the old Whitlock house." She was very specific about that. "Where the roses now grew, where blood had been spilled and secrets buried." Catherine's final move in her long game, to transform a place of death into a place of life.
There's also this.
Slack handed her another letter, from the law firm, but apparently Catherine's words. Asterisk, Miss Marple, if you are reading this, then you have received my final creation, and my final gift. You alone saw through all the lies to the truth, at the heart of this tragedy. You alone understood that we were all victims and all guilty. The doll I made is my confession. Every stitch is a sin remembered. Every carefully crafted feature a life destroyed. But the hair at its heart is my promise, that from death can come life, from tragedy can come hope. Build the home, Miss Marple. Fill it with children's laughter where once there was only silence. Let them play where Emma died. Let them dream where nightmares were born. It is the only redemption any of us can hope for. But I leave you with one last secret, one last truth that changes everything and nothing. Felicity Harmon is exactly who she needs to be. That is all that matters. That is all that ever mattered. C.K. Ack. Cryptic to the end, Slack muttered. What do you think she meant? But Miss Marple was smiling. A sad but understanding smile. I think she meant that identity isn't about blood or documents or DNA. It's about the stories we tell ourselves, the families we choose, the love we dare to give, despite everything that argues against it. She looked at the doll again, seeing it now for what it was. Not just a confession, but a prayer that from the tangled web of the Whitlock tragedy, something good might finally grow. I'll do it, she said quietly. I'll build the home. Over the following months, Miss Marple oversaw the transformation of the Whitlock estate. The rose garden was carefully transplanted, integrated into a larger design that included play areas, vegetable plots, and quiet spaces for reflection. The home itself was built to look nothing like the Gothic mansion that had stood there before, all light and air, and welcoming spaces. Felicity and Emma returned for the opening ceremony, both sun-bronzed and radiating contentment.
It's perfect,
Felicity said, watching as the first children explored their new home. Aunt Catherine would have, well, no, she probably would have hated that it's so normal and happy, but I think that makes it even more perfect. Aunt Catherine, Miss Marple asked gently. Felicity smiled. We've decided to adopt her too, in a way, not the woman she became, but the woman she might have been if life had been kinder. The woman who loved Emma, my mother, enough to spend decades plotting revenge for her. That kind of love, even twisted as it was, deserves some recognition. They stood together, watching the children play. One little girl with violet eyes was carefully arranging dolls in a dollhouse, making them talk to each other in serious voices. "We donated Cornelius's tools and materials to an art school," Emma said. "They'll teach young artists to create beauty instead of whatever it was he created." Seemed fitting. "And the doll Catherine made?" Felicity asked. "The one she sent you?" Miss Marple had placed it in a glass case in the home's library, with a simple plaque, "In memory of all lost children." It stood as a reminder and a warning, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. "It's where it needs to be," she said simply. As the ceremony concluded and the guests dispersed, Miss Marple found herself alone in the garden with Dr. Haydock. "Remarkable how it's all turned out," he said. "From such horror to this." "Life has a way of asserting itself," Miss Marple replied. "Even in the darkest soil, seeds of hope can grow." Very poetic. But do you think it's really over? All the secrets revealed, all the ghosts laid to rest? Miss Marple considered the question, thinking of Dr. Morrison's letter, of Sister Marguerite's confession, of Catherine's final cryptic message. There would always be secrets, always be questions without answers, but perhaps that was as it should be. "I think," she said finally, "that the secrets no longer have power to hurt, and that's a kind of ending in itself." As they walked back toward the main building, a child's laughter rang out across the garden. Where once dolls had stood in silent judgment, children now played in joyful chaos. Where blood had been spilled, roses bloomed. Where secrets had festered, truth and acceptance had taken root. The dollmaker's vow had been fulfilled in the most unexpected way possible, not through revenge or revelation, but through transformation. The past acknowledged, but not allowed to poison the future. And in the library, behind its glass case, Catherine Knight's final doll watched over it all, with its changing face and shifting expressions, holding within its heart a single golden hair, the last physical reminder of the child, whose death had started it all. But even that was transformed now, from a symbol of tragedy to a promise of protection. No child in this house would ever be forgotten, ever be unmourned, ever be reduced to just a secret in someone else's story. That was the true dollmaker's vow, Miss Marple realized. Not Cornelius's twisted love, or Catherine's elaborate revenge, but this, that every child mattered, that every loss deserved remembrance, that from even the greatest horror could come healing. As she left the Whitlock Children's Home that evening, Miss Marple looked back one last time. Lights glowed warmly in every window, and she could hear the comfortable sounds of bedtime stories being read, gentle arguments about toothbrushing, lullabies being hummed. The transformation was complete. The story at last was truly over. Or perhaps, she thought with a small smile, it was just beginning. But that would be a different story, one written by the children who would grow up in this place of second chances. And that, surely, was the happiest ending of all.